Kofi did not sleep the night before the alignment, and neither did Pogna Zara. They sat in the courtyard while the others rested. Azindo in the cave below, his shadow maintaining the bridge to the real skin in a thinned standby thread, the young man's breathing steady and deep, the discipline of someone who had learned to rest while a part of him worked. WuDon against the eastern wall, her palms flat on the earth, her communion connected to the guardian in a low-frequency vigil, not sleeping exactly, but operating at a reduced state that let her body recover while her connection held. Zuera and Tibigia in one of the old quarters' less collapsed buildings, the soldier sleeping with his hand on his weapon, and the pattern keeper sleeping with the smock against her chest. Its encoded frequency, a soft pulse that Kofi's system vision read as a lullaby being sung by a loom that had outlived its weaver. Samini kept watch at the courtyard entrance, his petrified staff planted in the earth, his communion tuned to the root lines for any sign that Tohaje's preparations had extended beyond the chamber. Kofi and Zara sat across from each other in the center of the courtyard and rehearsed the duet. The rehearsal happened in the frequency register that their reformed minds shared two protocol architectures, built by the same designer, 43 years apart, reaching toward each other through the medium of the system they had both been trained to maintain. Kofi's mind was fresh, sharp-edged, active, the knowledge integrated 3 days ago into architecture that still carried the echo of its own construction. Zara's mind was emerging. The 43-year suppression was coming down wall by wall, seal by seal, with the systematic thoroughness of a woman who had built the barriers, and therefore knew exactly which stones to remove and in what order. The first seal broke at moonrise. Kofi felt it through the shared frequency, a sudden expansion in Zara's architecture, like a room doubling in size. Knowledge flooded the new space. Root line harmonics, encoding theory, the mathematical structure of the convergence sequence. Information she had sealed at 17, compressed for 43 years into spaces too small to hold it naturally. As the seal broke, the knowledge expanded with the slow, insistent force of a tree root pushing through stone. Zara's breathing changed, her jaw tightened, her hands, pressed flat against the earth, trembled.
"I remember the breakings,"
she said, her eyes were closed. Her voice carried the specific texture of someone reliving rather than recalling the memory not retrieved from storage, but experienced again in real time, the 17-year-old girl's terror arriving fresh in the 60-year-old woman's body.
"The moment the protocol killed the girl and built the woman around her ashes. I sealed it because I did not want to remember what it felt like to die."
"The breaking is not death,"
Kofi said. He spoke from the authority of recent experience. 3 days was not long enough for the memory to have faded, to have softened into abstraction. He could still feel it. The white-hot erasure and reconstruction. The scream. The scavenger holding onto his ruined knee in the amber dark, while the protocol dismantled his mind and rebuilt it around the one piece he refused to surrender.
"It is remodeling. The original mind does not have room for the knowledge. The protocol removes the walls and builds a larger space. The process feels like death because the old self ceases to exist as a separate structure, but the person survives. The person was always going to survive. The protocol is not a killer. It is an architect with no bedside manner."
"You sound like the dome."
"The dome and I agree on the mechanics. We disagree on the bedside manner."
Zara almost smiled. The expression was brief and fragile, a crack in the wall she had worn as a face for 4 decades. The first genuine lightness Kofi had seen from her. Then the second seal broke, and the smile vanished, and Zara's hands went rigid against the earth. This seal was deeper. The knowledge behind it was not operational, it was structural. The unified perspective. The way the 4 fragments interlocked. The design of the system as a single living architecture rather than 4 stolen pieces pretending to be independent traditions. Zara had sealed this knowledge most thoroughly because it was this knowledge that had terrified her at 17, not the power, but the implication. If the system was unified, then the factions were thieves. If the factions were thieves, then her authority as Pogna was built on stolen property. If her authority was built on stolen property, then every decision she had made for 43 years was made from a chair she had no right to sit in. She hesitated. Kofi felt it through the shared frequency, not a technical failure, not an architectural collapse, but a human flinch. The woman who had sealed this knowledge at 17 was, for a moment, 17 again, standing in the dome, seeing the truth for the first time, choosing again to look away.
Zara.
She did not respond. The seal held. Her hands pressed harder against the earth, drawing on the earth bond the way a drowning person grips a rock, not reaching for something new, but clinging to something familiar.
Zara, you are not 17.
I know that.
Her voice was tight, controlled. The Pugnaz voice, the one she had spent 43 years perfecting, the voice that gave orders and received tributes and never, ever trembled.
You are 60 years old. You have governed Ironhaven for 4 decades. You have maintained the Earth bond, filtered corruption, spent years of your own life bridging distances you should never have had to bridge. You reached me in the dome when I was dying. You spent 5 years of your body to save a boy you had never met.
Kofi paused.
You are not the girl who ran. You are the woman who came back.
Silence. The courtyard was still. The Dambad drums had paused for their deep night rest, and the only sound was the wind through the old quarters' broken rooftops and the distant pulse of the root lines beneath the earth. Then the seal broke. Not gently it cracked, and the knowledge behind it flooded Zara's architecture like a dam releasing, and she made a sound that was not a word and not a cry, but something between them, the sound of a truth arriving after 43 years of exile. Her eyes opened, wet clear.
I remember now.
As she said,
All of it, the full design.
the rehearsal could begin properly. 2 reformed minds, synchronized for the first time, reaching toward each other through the shared frequency. Kofi extended his conducting line, the primary sequence, the modified convergence plan, the improvisation he had designed when he saw the trap from outside the walls. Zara met him with her counterpoint. And the counterpoint was extraordinary. It was built from her 43 years of Earthbond experience, not the protocol's knowledge, not the system's architecture, but something older. Something that predated the factions, predated the Zagale's construction, predated the very concept of a magical system. The Earthbond connected Zara to the land itself, not the root lines that the Zagale had threaded through the geology, not the encoding frequencies that hummed through the stone's mineral structure. The stone itself, the actual, physical, indifferent stone. Her counterpoint traveled through bedrock, through compressed millennia of laterite and quartz and ferrocrete, through geological layers that remembered the weight of ancient seas and the heat of volcanic intrusions and the slow, patient pressure of continents grinding against each other over timescales that made the Zagale look young. The stone did not care about magic. It did not care about factions or fragments or enskinment or corruption. It carried Zara's frequency because Zara had asked. And Zara had been asking for 43 years, and the stone, which had been asked for nothing by anyone in the 4 billion years before her, had developed something that was not quite loyalty, but was not quite indifference either. The stone remembered her, the way old furniture remembers the shape of the person who sat in it, the way a path remembers the feet that wore it smooth, not consciousness, not affection, just the physical fact of long association written into the mineral structure by 4 decades of daily communion. Zara's counterpoint reached the chamber through the bedrock, through the geological substrate beneath the Zagale's system, through a medium the trap did not monitor because Tohage had built his trap from system materials and the earth was not the system. The earth was the ground the system stood on. The trap monitored the building. It did not monitor the foundation.
Tohage studied the system for 20 years.
Zara said, her eyes closed, her counterpoint flowing through the stone with the steady patience of water, finding its level through cracks in a dam.
He reverse-engineered every frequency, mapped every connection, understood every fragment. But he never sat on the ground. He never pressed his palms to the earth and asked it to remember him. He studied the house. He forgot the land beneath it.
And the land is yours.
Kofi said,
The land is no one's, that is the point. The land is the land. It does not belong to factions or fragments or system designers. It was here before all of them, and it will be here after. But it knows me, and it will carry my voice.
The duet took shape. 2 lines, each complete in itself, each following its own harmonic logic, interweaving to create a combined frequency pattern more complex than either alone. Kofi's primary line was the modified convergence sequence derived from the protocol's specification, but reordered, retimed, improvised. It would travel through the system's established frequencies, root lines, shadow bindings, encoding network. The trap would see it. The trap would try to capture it. And the trap would be occupied with Kofi's line when Zara's counterpoint arrived through the bedrock. Carrying the reunion frequency through a channel the cage had not been built to intercept. They practiced the timing. Kofi's line beginning at the moment Zara's smock activated the convergence mechanism at the chamber's threshold. Zara's counterpoint beginning 3 seconds later, when the trap's calibration window opened and its capture fields committed to Kofi's frequency. They practiced the interlocking the specific moments where the primary line and the counterpoint intersected, creating harmonic nodes that amplified the reunion frequency beyond the trap's containment capacity. They practiced the crescendo the moment when WuDon opened her full aperture communion channel, and the Zagale's frequency flooded the chamber from every direction. And both conductors' lines rode the flood like boats on a rising tide, carrying the convergence energy to the real enskinment skin through Azindo's shadow bridge. They practiced until the architecture was instinct. And then they stopped. Not because the rehearsal was complete, a single night was not enough to perfect a duet that had never been played, but because their bodies demanded it. Kofi's headache had reached a frequency of its own, a dull roar behind both eyes that pulsed in counterpoint to his heartbeat. Zara's hands shook where they pressed against the earth, the unsealing's toll written in the fine tremor of muscles that had been holding tension for 8 hours. They sat in the quiet. The courtyard was dark. The stars above the old quarter were thick and bright. The harmattan had cleared the sky of moisture and left behind a vault of cold light that the pre-dawn air had not yet begun to wash away.
You said the cost of reunification was not destruction.
Zara said. Her voice had changed during the night. The Pugna's careful control was gone. What remained was rougher, rower, closer to the voice of a woman sitting on cold stone at 4 a.m, tired beyond protocol.
You said it was truth.
Yes.
Explain.
Kofi looked at the courtyard, at the sleeping defenders, at the cave entrance where Azindo's shadow bridge held the connection that might save or break the world, at the root lines pulsing beneath the earth, carrying the Zagale's clean frequency through the deep layer while the surface network rotted.
You don't fix a collapsed tunnel by holding up the ceiling,
He said. The scavenger's metaphor came naturally the only language he had ever owned, the vocabulary of a man who had spent 14 months surrounded by structural failure.
I tried that in the depths, month 3. A ceiling section was sagging over the only passage to the eastern water seep. I spent 2 days propping it up with salvaged beams, bracing, reinforcing, holding the broken thing together.
And
It collapsed anyway. The tunnel was built wrong. The ceiling was sagging because the walls were misaligned, and the floor was eroded, and the weight distribution was fundamentally flawed. My braces were treating symptoms. The actual problem was that the tunnel should never have been built at that angle in the first place. The lie was the tunnel itself, the assumption that a passage built wrong could be maintained right.
He let the analogy settle. Zara was listening with the focused attention of someone hearing a truth she had known for decades framed in a language she had never considered.
The factions are the tunnel.
Kofi said.
They are a structure built on a theft maintained by a lie. The lie is, we found this power independently. We own it inherently. Our authority is original, not derived. That lie is the load-bearing wall. Every institution, every hierarchy, every tradition the factions have built in 1,000 years is balanced on it.
And the truth collapses the wall.
No, that is what you thought at 17. That is why you sealed the protocol, because you saw the truth and calculated that the wall was load-bearing, and removing it would bring the ceiling down.
Kofi shook his head.
But the truth is not a demolition charge. The truth is a survey. It does not collapse the tunnel. It shows you that the tunnel was built wrong. What you do with the survey is a separate decision.
The factions will not take a survey well.
The factions will take a survey the way anyone takes a survey that shows their house was built on stolen land. Badly, with anger and denial and a long, painful adjustment, but the house does not fall. The house was built by their hands with their labor over 1,000 years. The land was stolen, but the house is theirs. The truth says, you are custodians, not owners. The foundations belong to someone else. Maintain them with respect, or the ground will shift, and the house will fall on its own.
Zara was quiet for a long time. The stars had begun to fade. The pre-dawn light crept across the old quarter's broken rooftops, turning the shadows from black to gray.
The girl who sealed the protocol at 17,
She said,
was not afraid of the truth. She was afraid of being wrong, of making a decision that affected everyone and discovering that the decision was a mistake. She sealed the truth because sealed truths cannot be tested, cannot fail, cannot be wrong. They can only wait.
And now
the waiting is over.
She opened her eyes. Clear, not the wet clarity of yesterday's unsealing when compressed grief had leaked from every broken barrier. Dry, focused, the clarity of a woman who had finished running and was standing at last in the place where the running had started.
And if the duet fails, if the truth kills instead of heals, if the comfortable fiction turns out to be load-bearing, and the world collapses without it, then I will know. And knowing, even knowing the worst, is better than sealing the truth away and spending 43 years pretending the question was never asked.
The sky lightened. The first gold touched the eastern wall. Somewhere beyond the old quarter, the Lunsi drums began their dawn invocations, hesitant at first, then finding their rhythm, the preliminary beats that would build through the day toward midnight's alignment. One day, less than one day now, hours. Kofi leaned back against the courtyard wall. The stone was cold against his shoulders. His headache was a dull throb, almost companionable, now a permanent resident that had stopped being an intruder and become a tenant. His knee ached with the particular insistence of a joint that had been held in one position for too long.
What did you do before?
Zara asked. The question surprised him, not its content but its category. They had spent 8 hours discussing convergent sequences and trap architectures and the metaphysics of system reunification. This was not that. This was a person asking another person a human question at 4 in the morning.
before the depths.
Before everything, before the candidacy, before the factions decided you were not enough, what did you do?
Kofi considered. The memories were still there. The protocol had rebuilt around them, not over them, but they had the quality of objects seen through water. Clear enough to recognize, distorted enough to feel distant.
I fixed things.
He said,
In Yendi, my mother's compound. I was the one who mended the roof when the rains cracked it, who rewired the generator when it failed, who figured out why the pump stopped working. I was good at it, at seeing what was broken and understanding why, and making it work again with whatever was available.
He paused.
The kingmakers did not consider that a qualification for candidacy. They wanted lineage. They wanted power. They wanted someone whose ancestors had done impressive things. My ancestors had done adequate things adequately, which was, apparently, insufficient.
And they sent you to the depths.
They did not send me anywhere. They rejected my candidacy and stopped thinking about me. The depths was my decision. I went underground because the surface had no room for a person with no lineage and no power and no impressive ancestors. At least the depths had honest garbage. The surface had garbage too, but it dressed it up in tradition and called it inheritance.
Zara made a sound that might have been a laugh in a different context. In the pre-dawn cold of the old quarter, it was something more private. Recognition. the shared exhale of two people who had arrived at the same understanding through entirely different routes.
I was going to be a potter.
As she said, Kofi looked at her. The old woman, the Pugna of Ironhaven, the most powerful political figure in the territories, the earth-bonded whose communion with the land was older than the factions themselves, was looking at her own hands as if she had just remembered they had once held clay.
Before the protocol, before the enskinment, before Ironhaven and the earth bond and 43 years of governing and sealing and pretending, I was apprenticed to a potter in my mother's village. Knock-hand, she made water jars, the red ones with the geometric patterns, you know the kind.
I know the kind.
She said I had good hands, steady, patient. She said the clay would teach me everything I needed to know about the world if I let it. That the secret to pottery was not skill but listening, feeling when the clay wanted to be a jar and when it wanted to be a bowl, and not imposing your idea on a material that had its own.
Zara turned her palms upward. The earth bond's connection hummed through them, visible in Kofi's system vision as a golden thread running from her skin down through the courtyard's stone floor and into the bedrock below.
I think about her sometimes, what she would say if she could see what her apprentice became.
She would say, "You have been making jars with the wrong clay."
Zara looked at him. The pre-dawn light was cruel to her face. It showed every year, every sealed truth, every wall she had built and was now tearing down. But the eyes were steady.
Yes,
As she said,
that is exactly what she would say.
the drums beat on. The sun crested the eastern wall and flooded the courtyard with light, warm, golden, carrying the particular quality of a morning that knew it was the last morning before something irreversible. The others began to stir. Samini shifted at his post. WuDon's communion deepened as the root line's dawn activity gave her more signal to process. From the cave below, Azindo's shadow bridge pulsed with the slow rhythm of a connection being maintained through sleep. Two conductors, two lines, two media, the system and the earth. A duet rehearsed in a single night by a scavenger with a bad knee and a queen with 43 years of sealed courage. Kofi looked at Zara across the courtyard. She looked back. Between them, in the shared frequency of two reformed minds, the counter-strategy hummed complete, rehearsed, as ready as a single night could make it. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but real. A plan built by a woman who knew the earth and a man who knew the garbage, and both of them understood, in different languages, the same truth. You do not fix a broken system by holding up the ceiling. You fix it by telling the truth about the foundations. The rehearsal was over. The performance was hours away. And in the enskinment chamber 3 levels beneath the chief's audience hall, Tohage's trap waited, patient, calibrated, certain of its design. It did not know that the conductor had seen its architecture from outside the walls. It did not know that the counterpoint would travel through stone instead of system. It did not know that its own bones were listening to the reunion harmonic and remembering whose skeleton they belonged to. The drums counted down. The alignment was coming. And 2 people who had been broken and rebuilt, one at 17, one at 23, both by the same ancient architect, sat in the morning light and said nothing, because everything that needed to be said had been said in frequencies that no one else in the courtyard could hear.